Welcome to the Recovery.com podcast. Join us as we navigate the nuances of recovery, featuring heartfelt stories, expert insights, and the latest breakthroughs in mental health and healing. Whether you're taking the first step or continuing your recovery journey, we're here and hope to support, inform, and inspire you. I'm your host, Senior Director of Content at Recovery.com, Dr. Mala Chaudhry Malgiri. And today I'm joined by fellow host and Chief of Staff at Recovery.com, Amanda Uphoff. In today's episode, we are so privileged to converse with Mr. Tom Farley. Mr. Farley is a multifaceted individual from Madison, Wisconsin, with a rich career spanning in finance, authorship, and substance abuse prevention. A Georgetown University graduate, he transitioned from banking in New York to running the Chris Farley Foundation, using humor to connect with diverse audiences. As an author, he penned the New York Times bestseller, The Chris Farley Show, a biography of his late brother, comedian Chris Farley. With appearances on major media outlets and contributions to several nonprofit boards, Tom currently promotes mental health and recovery as Rosencrantz Behavioral Health's Professional Relations Coordinator in Wisconsin and as a motivational speaker. Welcome, Tom. It's an honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you. That was a wonderful setup for me. So good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would love to start off by just asking you about your story. I know that it's very diverse and vast, and I would love for our listeners to get a picture of your life and your story and the things that you've experienced and what has led you to this point today.
Sure. Well, my story, boy, it changes because it's always changing, and it intersects with so much that we need to talk about today. I just feel like I can talk about almost any aspect of either substance use or mental illness. It's like, is that a good thing? I don't know. But I, we grew up in Wisconsin. I always like to say when I do talk to groups that growing up in Madison, Wisconsin, the Farley family, we checked three boxes. We, from what I could gather, had a pretty long family history of alcohol use and abuse. We were Irish and we lived in Wisconsin. So we really only needed to check one of those boxes to be enough for my story not to really change that much. But we checked all three. And in all three of those things, drinking was very normative. We came to think of it as part of our identity. If you're a Farley, you drank. If you're Irish, you drank. If you live in Wisconsin, you definitely drank. So, and we kind of managed that, maybe, if you will, because kind of we were in these kind of circles. Even when I went away to college, when I went to Georgetown, having been brought up in Madison, Wisconsin, a college town, I just thought drinking again was a normative thing for what you did in college. And I look back at it now, I probably stuck out a little bit being this kid from Wisconsin out in DC. But so I really I didn't know the issues, the problems that it was causing in my life. I couldn't see that. So I just went through this life just thinking, the first kind of thought that kind of where it entered into our family life was when we saw Chris start to struggle, and I was out in New York working when Chris came out to start his career, and I saw him struggling, and, we just kind of thought, well, he's going to lose his job, this dream job of his. So he's got to we didn't know anything about addiction or mental illness or all this stuff. We just thought it was behavior that Chris needed to correct. But it was Chris's problem, not ours. So we went through all of this stuff, started with, Chris got everyone's attention. But again, we didn't want to address it as a family because we just were fearful of being honest, the honesty that would have taken. It was easy for us to point to Chris. And I say that to a lot of families that have that one person when they're touched with addiction. For us as family, we could say, well, we're not that bad, so I guess we're okay. We don't need any help. as I, went through life, starting, I got married, had kids. I just kind of, when I started to have kids, particularly, I just like, I don't want them growing up like I did. Not that it was bad, but there was, I acknowledged the influence that alcohol had on us. So I would stop drinking for long periods of time.
Mhm.
Um, Thinking that was enough. And I would go to meetings during that time, but it was just like my family. I could always find somebody across the room and say, well, that person drinks more than me. I don't belong here.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then it would just be a matter of time before I would tell myself, you've been sober for 5 years. You got this. You can start to have a drink or a glass of wine. And all of a sudden, I'm back like I was. And I would have these cycles, and then Chris died, and I wanted to go out and be an advocate and tell Chris's story. So I did that, and I for a long time. So I was sober, not in recovery, telling somebody else's story about addiction, and thinking that I'm doing all this, good stuff, which I was, but
Mhm.
I was still, as I like to say, causing train wrecks in my life and having, issues, and I couldn't see the connection until just to wrap this first question up, it wasn't until I just kind of gave up and said, I gotta go, I gotta stop drinking again. And I was lucky enough to have a friend that said, come to a meeting. And I just looked at it differently, not how much other people were drinking. I was able to go in to the rooms and listen to people and say, okay, yeah, I've had strange relationships like that. I've had job loss like that. I've behaved like that. And like, I think that way. It wasn't about drinking. It was about something completely different. And so now making that change in finding recovery myself,
Mhm.
then I felt like, okay, I get it now. And now instead of just being an advocate after with COVID, I just like, I gotta get people help. So, there's a lot of stuff in between, but it starting from this family, that had a lot of drinking, with a sibling that died of this disease, to being an advocate, and then finally being in recovery myself, and now working in the field at Rosecrans and getting people help. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm excited that, I know that it's not even close to being over, so
Mhm.
that's all good.
Yeah, that is good. I mean, that you're talking about that journey that, we're talking about the journey that you went through. And I always find it interesting to see across the different stories and the people that I've talked to and work with where that journey really begins, right? That moment where you realize like this is it. I have to do something. And that poignant moment hits you at so many levels, right? From a
Yep.
mind, body, spirit, or in psychological terms, we'll say biopsychosocially or biopsychosocially and spiritually. And, I'm curious to know what that poignant moment was for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I describe this a lot. Like we go through all the stages. Like we know we need help. We've done the research and like what that looks like, and maybe we've had an intervention, and we get right up to this gate. This, the next step is I'm going to embrace recovery, and we freeze
Mm,
because our minds go, I know what it's going to look like. I know what you know, and you have fear and you stop because you're trying to protect yourself. And what I tell a lot of people thinking that are at that point, if I take one more step through this door,
mm,
like I'm trying to avoid all this pain that I know that's ahead of me. And I tell people, like, what I found out is like, what's on the other side of that door? Same pain. You're not avoiding any pain. It's life. I experienced when I got into recovery. Did my life become happier? No. Did I have all of a sudden reduced financial stress? No. Did my relationships get a little better? No. But I did notice that on that side of the door, when I walked through it, life got better, and it was never getting better before.
mm,
And that's the difference. Is because I'm looking at things differently. That was like kind of that, having that trust, and getting over that fear and self-doubt of making that leap. But once I did that, I still didn't kind of know what to do or how to do it. And it was
mm,
that the moment that really struck me was the first time I heard the words rigorous honesty.
mm,
And because I was like, wait, I get to live, that's a thing?
Mhm.
Because I spent my whole life, first of all, I was a marketing professional and I'm Irish, so I know how to BS like that, like I can't, like the best of them. And I was putting out this person my whole life that I thought the world wanted to see, that it was expected of me
Mm.
because I went to this school and I grew up this way. This is what I have to do. All my friends in college have, this size house, so I need to have that size house. So, they had these great jobs, so I need that job. And I was putting so much effort into that. And in order for me to be that person, I needed everyone around me to play a part. And I needed my wife to act a certain way, my kids to act a certain way, so I could be that person. I
Mhm.
needed my employers to act a certain way to give me that job, so I could be this person. And then, yeah, and it just wasn't. I was just struggling.
Mm.
And when I heard rigorous honesty, I'm like, oh wow. So that's when I started to be this authentic person and not being, certainly with the relationships. As I said, I was trying to manage and control the relationships. And now when I started just being who I am, there was initially that fear, like, what's if they don't like it? What's if I don't like this person?
Mhm.
But I had to get over that. And what I noticed when I just was concerned with who I was, relations started coming back. Repairing, like I wasn't prepared for that. I
Mm.
thought those were gone. I had to start all new stuff. But I was like, no, I was finally being that person that people wanted to see,
Mm.
that I wasn't letting them see. And so little by little, those relationships came back, not how I wanted them to be or the relationships I wanted. I tried so hard for it to be. They became the relationships that it were,
Mhm.
because of my work, and I had to be grateful to have those things. So living that life has been just phenomenal. The rewards. You couldn't have told me that that's what was coming, but
Sure.
I'm seeing it.
Sure. How would you define rigorous honesty? What's your personal definition of it?
Just being that authentic person.
Mhm.
You know, I'll give you an example. So, one of the things that I love to tell people is throughout my life, I could be and I think it's probably true for all my brothers. We could be in the middle of a crowded room, the center of attention, making everyone laugh, having all this time, and never feel so isolated in our lives.
Mhm.
And that's how we went through life. We didn't see it at first, but that's what it was. And the only way for us to manage that loneliness and that isolation was for us. The only thing we knew what to do was to drink, because it,
Mhm.
it it just got us through that situation. And so rigorous honesty was, I could still be in that crowded room, but now I'm just being myself.
Mhm.
And what I've learned is that that's my new barometer. As soon as I start feeling myself performing or being what I thought everyone else wants to be, then I'm like, okay, that now this isn't you, and you know what comes next. Either modify that behavior or just leave. So it's really important that rigorous honesty is just really trying to be that and put out that authentic self. And what's really neat about it is I still don't know what that authentic person is, but I'm the only way I can do that is to show other people and be out there publicly and saying, like it or not, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, I'm not going to perform for you. I'm not going to change to make you happy. I'm trying to find this person because that makes me happy. That makes not have to manage bad emotions in unsafe and unhealthy ways.
Tom, I'm very curious how hard that was for you. I
It was
mean,
a
I'm just a
relief.
normal gal and
Yeah.
I'm not like a performing funny guy like you. And it was really hard for me to take off the mask and sort of stop hiding by lying,
Right.
which is what we're
Well,
doing.
to be in that state of putting this person out that you aren't truly, not only is a lot of work, but also what fuels that is this intense feeling of fear and self-doubt. And once I
Yeah.
realized that's what it was, I'm a fraud. That's what I was feeling. It was this massive self doubt and this fear of putting that person out. Like, what's if they don't like me, kind of thing. Once I acknowledged and understood that's what was going on, that's what I was feeling. I could manage that feeling
Mhm.
of not knowing what that was. I had to numb it, but just living without that fear and self-doubt, it always is there. It always kind of crops up, but I'm aware of it. And I know, I've got so many things that I got meetings, I got people I can call. I have this
Mhm.
wonderful recovery community that helps me with that. What I tell people is like, but that's not my whole life. I am still this public person. I love being around people. But when that starts to get threatened, or I start to feel myself behaving differently and performing, yeah, I've got this wonderful recovery community that I can go to a meeting, I can call somebody, and it's like it helps remind me of it's that place of trust and acceptance that is
Mhm.
now my bedrock.
That was gonna be my follow-up question. So, did you have, like, a person or a group who kind of were helped you start to take off the masks?
Yeah, I'm so fortunate to have that person. And that person, as you know, is our good friend Shelley Dutch, who when I came back to Madison, people said, "Oh, you got to connect with Shelley," and I did, and we became good friends. And I used to go and do and speak to her teen IOP groups again, but at that time, still just talking about my brother and his addiction and maybe our family. So it wasn't really about me, but I that's where I got connected.
Mhm.
And so I was at that point where I'd love to talk about, like, I had been drinking again, and I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like, I was smart enough to know that what I was doing was just not sustainable. Like, if I leave the party right now, yeah, I can get home safely, which is already, too late, and I then and plot my way home so I could avoid detection. All this work, and then get home and say, "Well, the party's not over." And so I remember just saying, "I gotta, okay, I gotta stop drinking again." And I did the same thing I did before, just stop, just being sober. And I was just,
Mhm.
Shelly just called me up one day just because we hadn't talked in a couple of years. And she goes, "How you doing?" And I remember saying proudly, like, "Hey, I'm so glad you called. You know what? I haven't had a drink in 4 months." And she was like, "Oh, that's great." I was expecting more, fanfare and applause, but she said, "We should get coffee." And I said, "I would love to get coffee." And she goes, "Great. Well, meet me Saturday morning, 9 o'clock in the basement of the Presbyterian Church." Oh shit. Okay. I knew where that was going. The person that was saying it, I had admired so much. She had helped so many people in our community. How do you say no to that person? And so that was the first time and the first person where I just surrendered to. I surrendered. I'm like, you know what? I trust you. You accept me. I know those two feelings. And so I said yes. I surrendered. And I went in 2 meetings with her, and I started to not listen to how much people had drank in their life. I was like, I behave like that person. I do that. Yeah. It just was a different thing. And it was fun. I remember the first, Shelly and I talked about this because the first couple of times, it was tough to watch you, because I would get to my share and I'd have to say something funny. I had an audience and I had to perform, and, I would say something really funny actually and get like, okay. Well, I gotta laugh at that. That's funny stuff. And I realized, okay, there's something else going on here.
Mm.
And I started to open up and being honest about some of these things that were I was carrying around. And then Shelly kind of like saw that. She goes, I told me so many times how proud she was, because she just saw this transition. And I'm like, she was the first person that acknowledged that I was changing. I was being that person that she probably already saw from day one, that I still am trying to find. And I'm seeing glimpses every day of that person. But we're fortunate enough if we have people in our lives that do see that, we've got to I've got to open our eyes and to those people. That's the
Mhm.
toughest thing is to these people are around us all the time, and we're in such a place of isolation that we don't see it.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm blessed that I was at least able to see it
Right.
with that first person.
I mean, this is phenomenal. You're telling us about how you were chasing your perceptions, and getting lost behind them and lost with them. And that despite that, as you were progressing in your journey, you discovered that connection can
Yeah.
be so healing. And that's something that I think we don't talk about enough, that healing requires connection. And we say it all the time, mental health and addiction are diseases and diagnoses
Yeah.
that end up leading us to a place of isolation. So that connective element is so, so important. And you're telling us how that those moments of connection really helped you. What are some other connective moments that really did it for you? And what would you recommend to others
And
in terms of finding that connection?
yeah, that's great. That's one of my favorite sayings is like we don't heal in isolation. So there was a really interesting before I started this job at Rosecrans, I worked for United Way of Dane County. It was during COVID, so it was a wonderful team that I never met. It was only virtual. I love my community, I love my nonprofit work. That I kind of embraced that over time, and so in the middle of COVID, that summer of 2020, when it was just really a tough time, for a number of reasons. We, as an organization, sponsored and have been and still do an event that the YWCA puts on here in Madison called the Racial Justice Summit. And like, as I said, it was that summer that was pretty tough. And I'm like, and they said, well, if you want to go, it's 3 days. We have all these slots available. And I said, you know what? I got to approach this like I do my recovery early in recovery. Just show up, shut up, and listen, and maybe you'll learn something. And I did. I showed up, and I learned a lot. I leaned into that. But the really interesting thing was the first day, the last speaker said, "I'm going to send you home with some homework. I want you all to go home and identify a place in your life where you have and experience deep belonging." And I understand where he was coming from is there are people in our communities that never feel that, and he wanted us to get in touch with that. And I'm like,
Mm.
I got the assignment. Okay, so I went home. Like, where do I feel deep belonging? Is it my is it my family? No, unfortunately, no. I love them all, but no, it's tough. Is it my work? Yeah, I was working for United Way. I loved United Way and loved the people I worked with, but no, it wasn't a sense of deep belonging. Was it my alumni group at Georgetown, which I'm very connected with? These are my best friends in the world. But no, is it my faith? No, I'm Catholic. We have our issues. So we're working on that. But it wasn't that either. The only thing I could come up with at that time, and I've been in recovery for about a year and a half, was my recovery community, where when I walk in, that deep belonging. And it's funny, the first couple times I remember going into a meeting and thinking to myself, really, the rest of my life with this ragtag group of like, but these aren't my friends. These I don't have connection. We have different lives, and all of a sudden, this group that I was like, oh my god, it was making me feel differently, and I was thinking, God, I hope so the rest of my life. And so, with that, to answer that question was with my recovery community, and now I speak all over the country, and I find a meeting, and I go, and I know, and as soon as I walk in, I have that deep belonging and connection, and it's not, as I said before, not that I'm to stay in that place, but boy, for the first time in my life, having that sense of belongings to other humans, I just realized at that point how isolated it must have been.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
That sense of belonging, because I've been talking about connection for years, the need for connection, but as that sense of belonging, that drives it home a little bit more,
More.
because that now you're connecting at a more human level, that belonging, like, okay, when you can look around and like, yeah, I have a sense, these people give me a sense of belonging, and They don't look like you. They don't act like you. They don't have the same background you. That's like when you like,
Yeah.
this is who I belong to. Yeah,
Mhm.
because we're all humans.
Yeah.
So
I love
that's pretty cool.
I love that. How did finding connection amongst your people help you with rediscovering your family and understanding the relationship that you wanted to build with them?
It's that sense of trying to be who you are and not trying to control how others are, and not trying to control this relationship between you and I believe it's got to look like this, and I put on all this effort so it could be like that, and not giving the other person any kind of say in that, because you want to control that. And the wonderful times that I saw that play out was, again, I think it was probably that same year during COVID. My oldest daughter lives in New York. She came home. There was a break in COVID, and restaurants started to open up. And so she came home. She wanted to visit Madison. We went to had lunch at a place on the west side here, Bar Taco, a taco place. And we walked up. It's funny. So this is my oldest daughter, who kind of, she was kind of the most at. She was there when things were starting to really get imploding with her family and her parent, her mom and I, and her response was like, "I'm getting out of shoot." So she
Mm.
kind of left and kind of went her own way. But so but she's my oldest daughter. I care so much about that relationship, and trying to repair that relationship. So we go to this restaurant, and the maitre d' meets us at the door and said, we're still in kind of a COVID protocol, so we don't have menus. You order on your phone, and we don't have wait staff. So, but somebody will come out from the kitchen and give you your meal. And I got like all kind of frustrated and boomerish. I'm like, well, I got a question. Like, if I'm on my phone ordering my lunch, and my daughter's on her phone ordering her lunch, like, but I want to pay, how do we do that? And he's like, well, if you need paper menus, we'll bring those out. I'm like, I didn't say that. I got really like, that's not the question I asked. And I caught myself, and I go, you know what? I'm sorry. We'll figure it out. I brought a millennial. I'm going to let her figure it out for us. And I said, I'm sorry. And I was really nice to the guy. And then I turned to my daughter, and I was like, I'm so sorry. I wanted to be present here with you. I'm so excited that you're here, Madison. Figure this out for us so we can eat. And she paused and she looked at me. She goes, Dad, I got to tell you, when we were growing up, that kind of interaction you just have with that guy happened all the time. And we would just know to stay away from you the rest of the day,
Mhm.
because you would carry this little thing all day long, and everyone would pay for it. And I was like, hey, you're not, that's totally not me. And yeah, it was totally me. And she goes, so when you started in on that guy, I'm like, I had this tense moment, like, oh shit, here we go again. But then you stopped, and you started to apologize you did something. Then you totally changed your demeanor. And then you did something you never did before. You apologized to him, and you turned to me and apologized to me.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, you saw that. And I wasn't even trying to, like,
Yeah.
manipulate. I was just trying to be like the best person in recovery, authentic, the stuff I've been working on all this time. And the first time that I was with my daughter, she saw it, and I realized, maybe not at that time, but a little bit later, that that's that's what it looks like when a relationship starts to repair itself.
Mhm.
And what I really loved is that the relationship I have with my oldest daughter now, is it better? No. Is it how I wanted it to be, how I put so much effort for it to be? No. But it's a relationship I have, and I'm
Mhm.
totally grateful that I have that, because the alternative is none. So it's the relationship that it's the way it's supposed to be, at least for now, that you continue to work on. And wow. And if I can, hopefully I'm doing that with everyone else too, but just to see what it looks like right in front of your face, for
Yeah.
relationships to repair this. As I said, I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah. I mean, like holding, first of all, any parental relationship, like recovery or not, my goodness, like what a poignant moment to be able to have your child recognize and then, be able to say like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that was great, mom. That was great, dad." Like that hits for sure. But even in this capacity, right, we're talking about how there's a holding of space for your family members to be honest with you. So it's not just
Yeah.
you being
Sure.
honest with them, right? But it's holding space so that they can do that. You having the courage to be able to, hold that space for it, but also encouraging them, and then giving them that confidence that their honesty will be met in a productive and loving way is such a
Yeah.
rewarding moment. And I'd love to hear more about that from all of you, both of you, Amanda. I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts on that too.
Well, if I can show that I respect trust, it really is people don't have to earn my trust. That's up to me to get, to give it and whether they take it or not. And so, when people grab onto that, that's amazing. I don't know if that, but I saw a meme once on Facebook or something like that. And it was somebody saying like, it was somebody's post and said, I think it was they said, respect is a two-way street. And my first thought was, no, it's not.
Mm,
No, it's not. You have no control over somebody else's respect. All you can do is be in charge of your own and be respectful for other people.
yeah, yeah.
And if people grab onto that, that's great. And maybe their respect will come along, but you can't control their respect. You can control yours. And if I am serious about that, hopefully people see it, and I think they are. Again, that brings people into that space that you were talking about.
Mhm,
I,
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, what other people think about me is none of my business, that kind of nonsense, which I still have a hard
yeah.
time with
Oh,
that. It's way easier with some people than other people, and honesty and trust and connection, those things are all
yeah.
so closely interwoven.
You know what, Amanda, you know what it is, because before when we suspected that somebody didn't feel this way around us, we wanted that change immediately. We wanted it to not be that way, or we wanted to respond to it or react to it. We needed that immediacy. And what I'm finding now about those kinds of things is relationships don't happen that quick. They don't form that quickly. They don't heal that quickly. And all I can do is, as I said, by providing that space, hopefully over time something will get better. But if I continue to need evidence of a change in the immediate, I'll always be disappointed. But if I know that all you got to do is do this and be this person, what comes, and it'll be that much better.
I had that happen too with my relationship with my daughter, my oldest. I actually just went and visited her, and we're doing a yoga class together, and we were packed in there like sardines, and she, like, when we went to go do a pose, like, her knee kind of fell on me, and I grabbed it and just kind of like squeezed it and like loved it like a mother would. But afterwards I was like, I hope that was okay, because there was a point where she didn't want me to touch her. That was very much a consequence of my drinking. She didn't trust me. It was a very hard relationship. And she was like, no, mom, I liked it. I liked that that you grabbed my knee, and, so, but that's just, 4+ years of just keeping my side of the street clean and doing what I
Yeah,
need to do to be the best human I can be, and hopefully people notice, but if they don't, that's not why I'm doing
Mm,
it.
totally.
So
mm,
exactly like
I,
you
you
said.
know,
Yeah.
I was on a podcast a couple years ago. The host said, "What's the difference between recovery and long-term recovery?" At that time, I think I'd been in 2 years, in recovery, 2.5, and I said, "I don't know. I just know I'm in recovery. But if I had to answer that, I would answer it this way. When I did get divorced, probably 10, 12 years ago, and somebody asked me, why'd you get divorced? My answer was, well, my wife didn't respect me, didn't support me, very self-centered. How could I? That was the relationship. It wasn't very good. And that was my honest answer. That's what I thought, what happened. And then I got into recovery early on. And I remember thinking, if somebody asked me why did I get divorced, I would say, if I'm very honest, if I'm honest with myself, I wasn't very respectful and supportive either. And now, if somebody were to ask me that, my only answer is I wasn't very respectful and supportive of my wife, period. Her role has nothing to do with it because I need to work on what I can control and what I can do. I've tried to live that life. And now it was tough. It was certainly tough on my kids. And one of the first things I realized in that journey, in that particular journey, was this other person and I love the same three people more than anyone else on this planet. Why would I want to be in content? Why is that? Like, why aren't we at least connected on that? And so I said, you need to change, dude. And that's when I said, okay, what was your role? What is your role? And I looked at that, and now this person is now back. She's one of my. We were in college, we were friends, and now we talk. We have such mutual respect and love. Now, is it the relationship that I wanted with this person? No. Is it the relationship that I tried so hard for it to be? No. Was it the relation that I thought I should have? No. But it's a relationship I have, and I'm grateful for that because the alternative is that person's not in my life anymore. And here we share these three kids, and so because I believe in that, I'm sure my kids, are relieved that at least I still don't know kind of how she feels about it, but I know how I feel about it, and I'm genuine and honest about it. And again, it's somebody that I have great love and respect for. And we now, even though our kids are all adults, we still talk and we try to problem solve and we try to get on the same page with our advice. And yeah, I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
I just very fortunate that I found that even at this late stage of my life. It's
That's beautiful.
that's
It's a gift. Yeah. It's really
yeah, really is.
yeah. I mean, healing relationships while in recovery, it's a delicate dance and it requires that self-introspection and open dialogue that you're talking about. You're also talking about recognizing and honoring your own growth and committing to transparency. Again, holding that space. So you're building trust not just with others but with yourself in doing that. And that's amazing. Like that trust that we have in ourselves, that is probably the first thing to get impacted, right? You're talking about that strengthening too. What would you suggest to people to help with healing those relationships, not just with family, but also in so doing with yourself?
You can't do it alone. You can't do it on your own. You really need others. Others healing in a group it's amazing. And it's funny is I've got my AA groups and I've got little different ones. I've got a men's group, that we talk about certain things in a certain way, and that's helpful. But I've got I've got just all these things. And so, and like, do I go into a meeting? Like, I'd still go into meetings and somebody starts going off on something like, I had a tough week and let me tell you about my week. And I'm like, okay, you're going to listen to this person's week. Does it help your recovery? No, but maybe you sitting there with not a frown on your face, but just listening, maybe that's helping that person's recovery.
Mm,
It doesn't that make you feel good? So it's not all about you feeling and healing and feeling good. It's what's your role in other people's recovery journey and how, because that's part of it too, that you can't not have that feeling. That's just as good as you're healing, to be around other people that are healing too, and knowing that you're part of their healing journey is, I mean, that's amazing. You can't do it on your own.
mm.
And it isn't all about your journey. It's about all, that connection, belonging that comes with that connection. And again, I don't know what else is out there. For me, is my meetings.
I found trust is something that can't be forced back. Like in early recovery, I wanted that trust back so badly. I was like, but can't you all see I've been sober for 4 months
Yeah.
and I'm doing so great and I'm doing all the things. And it wasn't until I kind of had to almost surrender
Yeah.
the idea of it ever coming back is when it started to come
Yeah,
back
exactly.
because
Yes.
yeah,
That
Yes.
surrender. Yeah.
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 I mean, that's kind of a bummer for people who are in early recovery to hear, but it's just doing things for the wrong reasons. It's not like performative, like, look at me being so sober. It's like you have to trust that the trust
Well,
will
as
come
I
back
said
to you.
early, you've got to acknowledge, you got to have your eyes open enough to acknowledge that, like, is your life getting better? Absolutely it is. Is it getting better on your time frame? No, of course not. Is it getting better like in the linear way you want it to? No.
No.
But
Yeah.
one of the funniest moments in early recovery for me was when somebody said, "Oh, you should do. You should start a gratitude journal." And I'm like, "Okay, what the heck? What's a gratitude journal?" Just get a blank piece of paper, write gratitude on the top, and just start listing things out. And I'm like, okay. And I remember the first couple of times doing it and staring at this blank page for like a half hour, 45 minutes, and going, really nothing? You're not grateful for anything?
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I wasn't grateful I would like list easy stuff. I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful that I get to, you know, live in Wisconsin, or I'm grateful that it's summer, whatever, easy stuff. And what I realized, if I by continue going back to that, is that I was, and I think it's very common for most people, is that I was going through my day missing all of these things to be
Oh,
grateful for
mhm.
because I was looking at the big stuff or the stuff that's going to affect my life, and missing these little things, these interactions with somebody, or paying attention to those things and how it makes me feel. That's that yeah, again, I wasn't living out. I was missing all those things.
Yeah.
And now I go through the dumbest little things. I did a tour last year of state prisons, recovery groups in prisons. And, one of the first things I told them is like, I'm not here to, motivate you or tell you my story. I'm here because I'm in recovery and I need to be here with the people. I need to be here. And I talked about that whole thing about gratitude. And I said, honestly, I'm going to be driving back to Madison after this, thinking about this and what a wonderful, like, how amazing it was that I got to do this. And you helped create that moment of gratitude for me. And before, when I started this journey, just going out and talking about addiction, whatever, I would go to events like that, tell my story, and walk away. I'm like, I hope I did all right. I wasn't anywhere near that place of gratitude that I feel now when I have that opportunity to be open and honest and authentic and share and vulnerable, all that stuff. That puts me in a place that's like, I didn't have those feelings before.
Right.
Now I have them all the time.
You gave yourself permission to move freely and to breathe and to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's wonderful. Well, we've got time for one more question. A question that I always try to ask everyone. What does recovery mean to you?
Oh, good question. Recovery means to me is probably the first time in my life get to understand and be a human again. I mean, I think I probably always was a human. Jury's out on that. But I feel like this is what it's supposed to feel like. And that honest connection. And again, it starts with just me trying to find out who I am. And that's recovery gave me those opportunities. Honestly, and one of the things I talk about is somebody asked me, I had a conversation early when I started here. It was to our alumni group, and one of the clinicians that I work with now, was talking about trauma. And I know what trauma is. Trauma is something bad happens and your life's this way. And she said, no, trauma is these little things. We, as humans, we become collectors of trauma and we bury them. And I'm like, so I was supposed to speak it was a retreat. I was the last speaker. So for like an hour, I was pondering this concept of trauma. And when it came to me, I'm like, time out, before I talk about my story, I gotta acknowledge, like, what trauma was like in my family growing up in the Farley family is that we had one emotion we used for everything. Humor.
Humor.
If somebody was stressed out, we laughed. If somebody fell and hurt themselves, we laughed. Not to be mean, but we just didn't like other people's pain. We thought we didn't, everything was humor. We didn't develop any other emotions. And
Mm,
now in recovery, I get to acknowledge gratitude. I get to acknowledge humility. I get to grace, all these things, love even.
mm,
As I said before, when someone in my family was experiencing joy, we laughed.
mhm.
Not the same thing.
Yeah.
We couldn't even go to the high end of the emotional scale. Our coping mechanism was laughter, which became a trauma. I had this conversation with one of my daughters recently. We were talking about divorce and all that kind of stuff, and she said, "Do you look back?" And she was worried that I was looking back with regret. And I said, honestly, no, I don't look back with regret, because now I know I have the emotional tools to put in the right place. I don't look back with regret. Or am I sad? Yeah, I'm sad. I know what that is.
Yeah.
I don't mislabel it as depression or regret. It's sadness, and that's what it is. Recovery has given me these. I'm more aware of my emotions, and now I can manage those emotions in the proper way, and not something that's unsafe and unhealthy. So
Mm,
I didn't have those. I had few emotions.
mhm.
So that's another gift of recovery too. These gifts that just
Yeah.
pop out, and they keep coming.
I
You
love
know,
that. Oh, I love that.
they keep coming. I'm like, people say, like, when do you stop going to meetings? Like, I hope never, because every time
Yeah.
we joke, there's this one guy in our Wednesday night men's meeting, the old guy, he's been in like 30, 40 years in recovery. And his share every time is like, don't drink, go to meetings. Don't drink. And like every time. And one time I shared, I'm like, you know what? It's funny. We laugh about it, but I hear the same thing out of his mouth. But because I'm present and I'm giving him that space to say that, every once in a while, I hear it in a different way, or I hear it when I need to hear it. So yeah, it's the same thing every time, but right when I need it, thank God he says it. I'm like,
Mhm,
yeah, thank you. I needed to hear that. It's not like I'm done. I'm recovered. I'm recovering, and
mhm.
I'll always be in that way. And I'll always be kind of finding something new and changing my life and who I am. Just
Yeah.
tweaking it ever so often, and and that's a journey, and it's a journey that doesn't end. So
I'm so
that's
thankful, yeah, that you were sharing your journey with us today, and
yeah.
that we were able to walk together today and breathe with you and learn more about you. And I'm so thankful for your time, Tom.
Thank you. I appreciate you both, and everything you're doing. I love that we don't have to be alone and in isolation. We get to talk about these things,
Yeah.
and this forum is just so great
Mhm.
for that, to be able to talk about things and have these conversations.
Yeah.
Because man, I was running from an appointment, coming over from it's raining out, and I was all stressed out, and I was like, I'm going to be late for this thing, and now here we are, almost an hour later. I'm leaving in just such a great place,
Oh, yes.
and I'm so grateful for that.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you. So glad.
and all we were doing was
I
talking
just
about my
Tom,
journey, whatever.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Tom, I know we haven't known each other super well, but I've seen you here and there over the years, and I do notice a
Mhm.
softness that has come into you. I mean, I know it's hard to see when you look in the mirror every day, but there's just a little more grace there. I
Um,
see it.
well, what's wonderful is that people are seeing that. Thank you so much. But I'm in that people feel it's okay to be able to tell me that.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
and I'm able to hear that.
Mhm.
That wasn't always the case. I would
Yeah.
Right.
so just to be, if that's what recovery is that I'm around people that see change in me, or
Yeah.
feel okay to tell me that, and I do the same thing. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's pretty special.
That is.
So thank
We're a
you.
good group.
Yeah.
So thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.